Well, it's taken a long time, but I'm finally happy to say I've got former Special Branch Officer Les Milne with me. Les, I think you and I go back nearly 50 years, you know.
Yeah, and
it's a long time. And I just want to say on a personal level, Les, I've absolutely loved the friendship, and I really treasure all the happy times we've had together. There's not a moment that I've been with you that I haven't thoroughly enjoyed it. So that's just that's on a personal level. But Les, you know, the other thing I want to say is, and I've said it before on these talks, where one thing you can't take away from the Rhodesians, I think, and our history is our ability to laugh at ourselves. And I really think, and to laugh at adversity. And in this arena, I think you led the pack in teaching us how to laugh at danger and laugh at hard times. And that's where I think you've got a very, very special place in a lot of people's hearts, and certainly mine. So, Les, thanks very, very much for your time. And just tell us how it all started for you, a little bit about your background, and then how you ended up in the police.
And it's, yeah, look, yeah, you know, I suppose at the end of this, you would say thank you, but I've really, apart from you being a very dear friend of mine, I've got to really admire you and John Van Zyl for what you've done by bringing this out and letting guys chat and explain their experiences. Because, you know, Hannes, if I look at America, they lose 22 servicemen a day from suicide. And, you know, there is nothing for us Rhodesians at the end of this war. And I'm really sorry that more hasn't been done to help guys that have suffered seriously from it. And I think this program has helped a large number of people. And I know, although you gave quite a good introduction, we've got to thank you also. Hannes, I grew up, I was born in Livingston, and I grew up in Victoria Falls. My folks moved across from Livingston onto the Vic Falls side, onto the Rhodesian side, after Zambian independence, about 1969. And so when we moved across in those days, a lot of Zambians were looking for schools, sort of northern Rhodesia were looking for schools. And my parents ended up sending me to school in Petersburg, to Capricorn. So I went to Capricorn High School, and there was a stage that my folks looked at a school in Rhodesia, and then saying, well, you can come to school here now. But at that stage, I was quite happy, although each time I left for school, I wasn't that happy, but I was happy in my school environment. And so from school, I had a choice. I had to either go to the South African Army, which I'd signed up for, and because you have to do that to write your matric exams. But also I was going to be called up by the Rhodesians because I was living in Rhodesia, and you had to do 2 years. So either forces I was going to end up. And my brother had joined the police way before me. He joined in 1964. So, and so it was like a natural thing. I loved what he was doing and what he told me about the BSAP. And so it was a natural thing for me when I got back to the Falls after writing matric, was being called up. And I was called up on I joined the police on the 1st of January 1971. I was the only person from Vic Falls on the train. And we left from Vic Falls to Bulawayo, then caught the night train from Bulawayo to Salisbury. Harare, and and that was the start of my police career. But you know, Hannes, it wasn't easy being. On the train from Vic-Falls to Bulawayo was on my own, so that was fine. And then from Bulawayo, there were all the boys from Gifford Tech, Plumtree, Milton, Falcon, Hamilton. They were all on the train, so there was quite a full train of recruits going. And that's where it all started. And then you'd pick up all the guys from Guinea Fowl and Guello, and that's where it all started for me, because on the train, the first thing anybody says is, what school did you go to? And obviously I said Capricorn. And then it started. They started on me saying, weren't our schools good enough for you? And I was saying, no. Look, it was a choice of my parents. So as we got deeper into it and started to make mates, and that, they used to introduce me as, here's Les Milne from Capricorn. So that's what I was known as throughout my depot career. I was known as Les Milne from Capricorn. So, and then I started, Hannes, in the police. And, I was a bit underweight, and I was a bit weedy, and, not powerful prop forward, although I played hooker in the team. But and the interview with the officers, when they give you an interview, said, oh, so you're a bit underweight, we see. And it's amazing to think nowadays that weight was an issue in joining, but it was. They said, what happens if you get to a hotel and there are 5 rowdy drunks? How are you going to deal with it? So it was all questions like that to start off. Anyway, we got into it. And yes.
Who were your instructors, Les?
Oh, this is unbelievable. My instructor in the police was Mike Lambourne. And, he was throwing the hammer for Rhodesia at the time. And he was enormous, massive. And but my brother had a scene with Mike Lambourne where he was in Harare charge of Bulawayo charge office. My brother was a B car driver at the time. And he had a problem with a whole lot of coloureds. They had arrested these coloureds for drunkenness or something. And they had these coloureds handcuffed behind the charge office counter. And the coloureds kept threatening them, saying, yeah, we're going to sort you, XA, we're going to sort you out, we know who you are. And my brother turned to them and said, listen, you don't need to sort me out. I'll just bring a cadet to sort you out. And they said, bring a cadet. And my brother shouted, Cadet Lambourne, come here, please. Yes, sir. And he came, and, as Lambourne came through the door, he blocked the light from the other room, and these coloureds then changed their tune and said, no, we got no problem. So that's what Mike Lambourne was like. But he's a terrific guy. And, Hannes, we were marching, we were learning to march, and one day I was out of step. We were marching down the road, and Lambourne brought the squad to a halt, and I could feel him breathing behind me. And I don't know what it is, Hannes, with these instructors. They sort of talk out the corner of their mouth, and their lips turn to one side. And he said, you, Patrol Officer Milne, do you know what the difference between a midget, a dwarf, and a midget is? And the whole squad started you could see them rumbling in their stomachs. And I said, no, sir, I've got no idea what the difference is. Well, he said, let me tell you, a midget is smaller than a fucking dwarf, and you're a fucking midget. And if you don't get into step from now on, you'll be a dead midget. And from that day onwards, I never went out of step again. And that was, that was part of the humor in the start of the police force.
Who else was on your course, Les?
Look, my roommate was Daryl Brent. And we were good friends. But from the time of depot, I didn't really. I played hockey with Daryl during depot, but then we sort of, in the police, you get transferred to different stations and stuff like that. So I didn't see a lot of Daryl. But we were good friends. He was a good roommate and a very good sportsman. I understand he's got a few challenges now, but he's good and he's strong. He's a strong-minded guy, and he did well in support unit. But at the time he went to support unit, I had left. I'd gone to CID, I think.
So Les, you finish your recruits course. You now pass out as a patrol officer. What's your first posting?
My first posting, honestly, there were so many of us that they ask you where you'd like to go, and I said I'd like to go to Matabeleland district, only because my folks were in the Falls, and and I think my brother actually had got posted to the Falls, but I went down to Bulawayo driving school. And I spent 3 months there. I started off in traffic section because driving school was full. And then eventually I got into driving school. And once I'd passed out, they transferred me back to Salisbury. And I went to Salisbury Central Charge Office, which I didn't really want, but cheapest, I had no choice. So, and then those charge office duties, Hannes, we had to do guard duties at the Prime Minister's house. I was in charge office for about 6 months to a year, and then I got a transfer to Borrowdale Police Station. And I went to Borrowdale. I was in Borrowdale.
Tell us about some of your experiences in the early days as a uniformed policeman.
Well, Hannes, it's you're very junior and you're very and it was very well organized, but you had to, every case that you dealt with was a learning experience. So and you always had to take advice from the senior guys. But Hannes, I mean, it's incredible. We dealt with a lot of traffic accidents and a lot of suicides, especially in the tribal areas. There were a lot of suicides like that had to be investigated. And as a young guy coming from school to see all that is a big wake-up call.
Yeah.
So, but it was interesting, and you were working with good people, and there were good officers in charge. And listen, from Borrowdale, I transferred to Selukwe. I still wanted Matabeleland district, and there's always a story that the guys doing the transfer play darts, and they put your name on the dot and throw it onto the board. And where the arrow lands is where you're going to go. So I asked for Matabeleland district and I got Selukwe, which I was there for, I did about 6 or 8 months at Selukwe. But in Selukwe, when the Prime Minister, Ian Smith, came to his farm, we would go and meet him on the road, because he had come from New Serum, not New Serum, Thornhill, and then we'd meet his car and escort him to the farm, him and Janet. And I can remember, he would follow in a Peugeot 404, Hannes, and we were in the grey police Land Rover, and we were travelling along the road. Anyway, he hooted and we stopped, and it was the start of the liberation struggle, but we didn't realize how serious it would end up. But here's just a grey police Land Rover and the Smiths in a Peugeot 404. traveling along a farm road to their farm. And he said, I'm not sitting in all the dust. You please sit in my dust. And he went ahead. Meantime, we were actually clearing the road for him, but he went ahead. And that's how we used to take him to his farm. It just shows you how unbelievable the situation was when you see today close security, how they operate around the presidents and prime ministers. But yeah, on the farm, it was, he was a terrific guy on the farm. At the end of the day, a waiter or the cook of the house would come over with a tray full of beers, ice cold beers for us that he had sent to us. And and during the day, he'd make us help him. And he'd make you work as well. He'd say, okay, I want you to guess the weight of this heifer coming on the scale. And you had to guess. And if you had wrong, he'd say, come on, man, get the weights right. And he'd make you take part in all that activity. It was really, although a serious job, he made it really nice for us. And there were always three or four white patrol officers and 4 African constables on his farm at the time. And we used to guard the house and just monitor people coming in to see him or whatever. And then from Selukwe, I went to Enkeldon, Hannes.
Okay, and Les, that's where you tried to clean out the Enkeldon pub.
Hannes, that's we had that jail in the bar, and obviously I was being one of the POs in the area and that frequented that bar. I held the keys to it, and we used to lock people up if they didn't have a passport for Enkeldon.
Wasn't there a time where you went to close it down because they were?
Oh yes,
they were over.
Yeah, Hannes, I was on night shift. I was put on night shift, and I was told to close the licensed premises down. And there were only 2 in Enkeldon. There was one in the township beer hall and the Ankor Hotel. And anyway, I closed down the township beer hall. You had to just park your Land Rover there and make sure that everything was safe and there wasn't any throwing of stones and drunkenness going on. And then I moved across to the Ankor Hotel, and the car park was full, but you couldn't see any lights on. So I said to the constable, what's going on here? He said, no, boss, they're inside there. And I said, but it's 11:15. And he said, yes, no, I know. I said, but you can't see any lights. There's no lights on in the hotel. He said, no, that's they've got very thick curtains, but that pub will stay open all night. I said, no. And Hannes, I'd gone to Enkeldon. I had to sort of pull finger a bit. Hey? And so I walked around the back of the hotel, and it was pitch black. And, we had little police torches, and it had a beam that wasn't even a foot long. And I had this little police lamp going around, and it was pitch black. I was stumbling. I was by myself because I left the constable in the police Land Rover. And then I could see a light, and I made my way to the light, and there was this stable door. And I looked through the stable door, and it was jam-packed, and it was going full tilt. There was no ways. There was gambling. There was money on the table. There had been a cattle sale that day, and I think the whole of the Enkeldon farming and probably Featherston as well were there celebrating the cattle sale because there was just money on the counter. And Henry Roper Cook owned the Enkeldon Hotel, and Henry Roper turned to me and said to me, he always employed an old barman that was probably ex-alcoholic. So he had these two old barmen behind there, and I called them over and I spoke to him and said, "What's going on?" He said, no, everything's fine. I said, "Yeah, but looking at my watch, you're over your licensed premises, and it's now past 11. Last order's at 10:30, and this place doesn't look like it's closing down whatsoever. So, you've got to close this place." He said, "Okay, let me just go and speak to them." And he went over and he was speaking to some farmers, I didn't really look to where he'd gone, and he came back and he said, "There's a Mr. O'Neill who'd like to speak to you." So I thought, oh, brilliant. At least because, Enkeldon's a serious Afrikaans community. So I thought, oh, brilliant. I'll speak to somebody in English. And I walked into the bar, and there was Stoffel O'Neill, who became one of my greatest. He was a major cattle farmer in the area, but I was still learning about Enkeldon. And Stoffel was unbelievable, and that I learned afterwards. But I walked up to him and I said, "Good evening, Mr. O'Neill. I believe there's a problem. You don't want to leave or something." And he said, "Yeah, man. Yeah, we're not leaving here. We're a cattle sale." I said, "Yeah, but, according to our records, the licensed premises closes at 10:30. And you should have all been finished up and gone by now. And at the moment, I can see nothing's going to happen here." And I had my police cap on, and Stoffel pulled my cap off, walked to the window, and, there's the main Enkeldon Beatrice Fort Vic Road, and he threw my cap onto the road. And as he threw it, my Tambanadza or Tembo bus went past and flattened my cap. And to be honest, I left that hotel at 3 a.m, and this with the constable having to drive back to Enkeldon police station. So that was my sort of introduction into Enkeldon. It was amazing after that.
What did the member in charge say when you told him that you hadn't quite managed to end the crime ring at the Enkeldon Hotel?
No, I had a really good member in charge there at the time, and so it was all sorted out. But one of the funny things, and you know very well, Hannes, and it's a joke, but and it's not true, the story. But Sharon, Sharon Cockett, who was Sharon ONeal. She was due, and we used to do all the driving licenses in Enkeldon. On these far out district stations, you did the driving license. And the story is now, it's humor now, but it's not actually true. But they said to Sharon, "What you need to do is wear the shortest miniskirt you've got." And I think Sharon was, what could you get your license at 16? I think.
Yeah, 16. Yeah.
and the humor there was, wear the shortest miniskirt you've got, and just hope that you get Les Milne to test you for your driving test, because then you'll pass. And sure enough, it worked out like that. But and she did pass, but it wasn't because of her short miniskirt. But now, in today's world, it's known that she got her license from me because she wore a short miniskirt.
I'm sure there is some truth in that, Les. She was the best looking girl in Enkeldon, I think. Sharon. All the boys were after her.
Yeah, no, and she's a lovely person now. Yeah. But funny enough, she still tells that story. So I had to clear myself from it.
So, Les, then after Enkeldon?
Hannes, prior to Enkeldon, when I was in Selukwe, I'd applied for support unit. So, and sort of, to tell the truth is that I was sent to Enkhuizen from Selukwe because I'd come into court one day in Selukwe, and I ended up playing darts in the club before going back on patrol. And so my career in Selukwe was cut short, and I was sent to Enkhuizen. And anyway, my career in Enkhuizen was short, Hannes, because I'd applied for support unit, and they came up. You took as a vacancy came up, so I moved into, and so I left for support unit, and I had some very good friends, the Stellas and Buck Rogers and all the Rogers boys, so I moved to Harare or Salisbury, and I joined support unit, and I did, I think, just on two and a half years with support unit. But it was during this period, and you still call me by that name. I shared a house with Keith Luty, who went to the SAS and is quite well known amongst Darryl Watt and all the SAS boys. He was quite a serious operator. But we were in the same troop in support unit together. And on one of the occasions we were back from the bush, some people from Enkhuizen came to see me. It was the Stellas, in fact. And but I wasn't there at the time that they arrived. And then Keith Luty and Porky Paul came up with a story that some people came to see me from Enkhuizen, and they were pulling themselves up on the windowsill shouting "Vaas Bokkie." And so, I mean, they made up that story, but Vaas Bokkie, and Keith reckons he said to them, "Bokkie who?" They said, "No, Bokkie Milne." From Enkhuizen. So, so my name changed to Bokkie, and you're one of the few that still use it. And McCormack uses it. Steve McCormack and Duncan Paul Porky. He calls me Bokkie, but that's where
Bokkie's from there. Tell us, you're off to Mount Darwin. And your new partner in crime, Stu Michael, and
Stu actually before support unit, when I was in Borrowdale and Salisbury Charge Office, Stu and I were in the same Part 2 stick together. So we had done some stints up at Mount Darwin. Quite a few stints with Michael.
There was an incident where you did something in, I think it was Brigadier Hickman's car. What actually transpired that day? Somebody used a senior officer's staff car for the wrong reasons.
Oh no. That was when I was in the support unit, Hannes. Hello, Hannes?
Yeah, okay, I've switched. I think I've got my dongle working. So, sorry,
okay.
Did I take you a bit by surprise with that one about the was it Hickman's car?
No. It was actually General. He was a brigadier at the time, but it was General McLean's car, Brigadier McLean.
Okay, and what happened?
Yeah, and so we had got these beers, and we were traveling back. We sent some guys. We were in Mount Darwin, and we got some beers from Stavros. He was a Greek that had a little store.
Yeah,
and we got these warm bomber beers. And anyway, we were driving back, and we thought, the police bar in Bandura is called the Dungeon, and we thought, we'll just stop in the Dungeon and have one. And we stopped. So there was Rich Fiddler and Porky Paul and myself. And we stopped and started having a beer. And it was like 5:05. We started having a beer in the bar. And anyway, we were at the one end, and Brigadier McLean and I think there was Colonel Davidson from the RLI, and there was one other. They were having drinks with the senior assistant commissioner McCulloch at the other end, and they'd been playing tennis together. And Sandy McLean, the brigadier, Sandy McLean's car was parked outside the windows of the dungeon bar. Anyway, we started singing that ridiculous song about 3 German officers crossing the line. Parlez-vous, 3 German officers crossed the line, parlez-vous. Anyway, I think we were making a bit of a nuisance of ourselves at the time. And anyway, McCulloch came over and said, look, we don't want any singing like that in this bar. And you guys finish your beers and go. Where are you from? And we said, support unit, we're going to Harare. So he said, finish your beers and go. Anyway, we decided to have another beer. And I don't know who started the song up again, but it started up again. And then McCulloch came over and said, right, no more beers, out you go, and off you go. Get out of this bar. And so anyway, the 3 of us walk out, and our Land Rover was parked next to this Peugeot Army staff car. And I'm not sure which one of the 2, Fiddler or Paul, as to how they came about, but they decided that the one would wee on the front of the car, and the other one would do the boot, and then I would do the inside and the radio. So we were all having a slash on this army car, and it's still sort of the sun's just setting, when they were drinking their gin and tonics, and they looked out the window, and there were these 3 disgusting support unit individuals slashing all over the brigadier's car. And anyway, he came running out. In his statement, he came running out, and we had taken off in the Land Rover by then. In his statement, he said he shouted 3 times, stop, stop, stop. And the driver of the Land Rover leant out and shouted, fuck off. And anyway, we were oblivious to all of this and headed back to Harare. But just driving into Harare, there was a roadblock set up by Marlborough Police Station, which is on that road, right near opposite Standard Bank Sports Club. And anyway, the young junior to us, PO, at the roadblock says, I'm looking for 3 support unit guys coming from Mount Darwin. And we told him, no, well, we're from Centenary. The road joins just at Mzee. So they must be behind us. So he let us through the roadblock, but he was obviously ordered to stop those guys and then get hold of the support unit authorities. But anyway, we got through that roadblock. But it was the next day that was a problem, because we were told to dress up in our number 1s, the 3 of us, and that we were to go before the OC, which was an officer by the name of Guy Horton, who was the assistant commissioner in charge of support unit. And anyway, we had to be there at 2:00, and we dressed up. And Pat DC, who was the chief inspector in charge of support unit, said, who's the senior man? I said, I am, sir. He said, okay, you lead in, turn around, and you salute the OC. All right. Do you understand Pierre Paul? Do you understand Pierre Fiddler? Yes, sir. And we marched into Guy Horton's office, and Fiddler, who was at the back, pushed Porky Paul, who then pushed me, and I landed up in Guy Horton's cupboard. He had his cupboard where he held all his dress suits and his uniforms. Anyway, I came out and all three of us saluted, and that's when we were given 10 days confined to barracks as punishment, and we were banned from all the police bars, except the only bar we were allowed is the police club, which is under quite strict controlled management. But yeah, and that's what happened to us.
Bookies, and the Batman suit. You had a very soft spot for your Batman suit, and even to the point where you're out directing traffic.
Sorry, Hannes?
Directing traffic in your Batman suit.
Yeah, Hannes, yeah, I don't know how I came across it. I think maybe it came from Stu Michael. But yeah, I had this Batman costume, and yeah, ended up on traffic duty and put it on and directed the traffic in this Batman costume.
Oh dear. Borkie, tell us more about your time in support unit, the good times, the bad times.
In, I think, 1972, when I was in Part 2 with Stu Michael, we were led into our very first contact. And, you know, it was in the early days where we drove in a grey Land Rover. I mean, there had been one or two landmines, but not as much as it was towards the end of the liberation struggle. But yeah, Hannes, that's how we traveled. I think the SB guy at that stage was Dan Stannard, and we were Part 2 reaction stick deployed to escort him and his African constable or sergeant. They had picked up information on a tour group. But, you know, Hannes, in those days, if you had a contact, you had to count the rounds that you had expended. You had to fill in a contact book, which was like a traffic book, and you had to fill in all the details on the form as to the contact, how many were involved, and in actual fact, in the early days you'd have to pick up your empty cartridges and hand them in, and I suppose we were in thick riverine vegetation when we were shot at, and we were a sweep line for the RLI, who were on the other side of the river, the dry riverbed. So it was, yeah, look, there were no casualties either side, but it was the beginning, and it was really, I mean, in 72, it was a wake-up call. I mean, you're 19 years old and you shot at, and you know, we had lanyards and our whistles on the end of the lanyards and our police notebook in our pocket. And now we were in a full scale, and also we didn't have full wedding kit or water bottles, or we had I think we were given 2 pouches each for our FMs that we were carrying. So those were the early days, and yeah, it was a wake-up call, and we certainly learned from it. But in support unit, you know, it got a bit better. The training was a lot better. We had good African troops, and they were formidable in the end. Although I wasn't with them in the end, I operated with them in the end, but being a special branch officer. But they were good troops. And I think we were very effective even in the early days. And the demand on support unit was unbelievable. a demand from the intelligence service to secure bases around the country and police stations. And so it became bigger and bigger as it went on. But I left in 76, 77, 76, I think, towards the end of 76. So by then they were gaining momentum. And I really admired the African policemen that were with us. And, you know, Hannes, it's one of those sad stories. I don't think at the end of the war they were looked after because there was no one to be able to look after them. But yeah, they all went their separate ways and we went ours, I suppose. That was one of the sad parts. I'd come across support unit in my later years in Bandura. I used to visit them. Yeah, honestly, it's sort of you could see they kept up the remnants of the old support unit, but they were good troops.
Yeah. Les, so where were your sort of deployments when you were with support, mainly in the Northeast?
Yeah, in the very early days, I served in A Troop, which was run by Trevor Bothwell, and we used to operate out of Matoko, mainly Kotwa, which is just before Nyamapanda. So we had two patrol bases, Kotwa and Nyamapanda. We hadn't deployed into Mount Darwin at that stage. So we would travel to Kotwa or Nyamapanda. Those were the two sort of bases we had. And we were operating down the Rhodesia River and places like that. And there was also quite a well-known policeman with us at that time, or operator Mike Clayton was with us, and Keith Reynolds, and all the old school of support unit. John Arkley, they were all part of the support unit, but not necessarily in the same troop. Then we would go back to Rari, and then it changed. I moved to B Troop under Tom Thomas, and I was with Keith Clutie, and Brian Goddard was another one in B Troop. But we were doing Kotwa, Nyamapanda, and then we'd branched out to Mount Darwin. We were going to Swan Lake, which was a farm run by Dennis Watson. We had a base. We took over a base, actually, from the South African police that were there. And when they pulled out, we moved into their base and took their base over. And I operated out of Mount Darwin for a number of years, Marymount, Rishinga, and Swan Base. And then I moved across to Chiweshi with still with B Troop, but at that stage I seemed to have been moving from troops. I went into L Troop for a while, and then into the Zulu troops, and then at the end, Hannes, I applied for a ground coverage position in an operational area. So I left support unit to go on to ground coverage. I must tell you that in my time in support unit in Mount Darwin, I was with the special investigation section of support unit. I'd left B Troop and joined SIS, and we were operating and doing night operations. I'd come back, and I'd got lost rejoining the rest of the group, but eventually I found my way out, and but the next day I was leaving I was in the guard of honor of a fellow support unit guy, a guy called Des Niemand, who's passed. I was in his guard of honor, so I was meant to go back to Harare. And anyway, Hannes, it's one of these things that you were taught and that you don't do, and was to clear your weapon before you entered Mount Darwin or any police station or any base area. You clear your weapon. Well, we had been walking in the rain, and we had lived in the rain. So I got off with my kit, and my batman met me at the truck as the truck pulled in. And I handed him my rifle and my webbing and my backpack, and he was going to bring it to the tent for me. And Hannes, I was standing in the tent taking off my wet kit, and he dropped my rifle. And as he dropped it, it caught onto the webbing and moved the safety catch from safety to load. And he picked it up by the trigger guard. And the shot went off. And the round went sort of along the ground, hit a sack of potatoes. And the first round in my magazine was Tracer. So it went through a sack of potatoes and ricocheted and hit me in my bum at the back and exited out near my hip. But by then it had, it like cauterized the shot. And I sort of swung around, and we heard this bang, and we thought, jeepers, what's going on then? We were all looking around. I was even looking around, saying, shit, I don't know what's happened here. And I looked down, and then I just saw blood pumping out. I said, shit, I've been shot. But at that stage, I didn't know it was my batman had shot me with my weapon. But and because it hit the potatoes, my nickname came out, and I was called Mash for a while. And anyway, I was casevaced to the RLI Fire Force Hospital, and the next day they were going to casevac me to Andrew Fleming. And Hannes, at the time of my casevac, so Fire Force school out came, so I couldn't get casevac. And Major Neil from the Scouts, who was very close to my brother, I just can't think of his first name. He committed suicide.
Oh, Creel.
Really? Neil Creel. So, Neil Creel, yeah. Neil Creel was in charge of the Scouts at that time in Darwin, and he organized an ambulance, and I was casevaced to Fleming. And I was, when you come into the ward in Andrew Fleming, we were still learning. There were wounded guys there already, but, the casevac sort of situation, and there were top, doctors to meet you and all that, and was wheeled in as wounded coming in, and everything sorted out, and you got those beautiful Harari nurses, that were in Fleming. They were gorgeous, those girls. In fact, the one nurse there, I was dating at the time. And anyway, I would get put into a ward, but I'm put into a ward with RLI guys who, Hannes, had serious wounds, and they had been in some serious dogfights, those guys that were wounded. And they had fought hard, those boys. And here comes a policeman, one that probably the RI disliked on their time off anyway. And secondly, you had to tell the truth there. How were you wounded? And it was staunch, because there I had to say I was shot by my batman, and then they said, "Yeah, you're a draft dodger. You're trying to get out of going and getting involved in fighting for the country." So, and although I was on a drip, I think it was a saline drip, not really to fix my bullet wound in my bum, but and the fact that I was shot in the bum was another question mark over the seriously wounded RLI guys. And it was a hard time. I think, in fact, they moved me out that ward. I'm sure those RLI guys were wanting to string me up in the middle of the night for trying to dodge the draw. but it was an accident, and and I got going afterwards. The medic, some of our doctors had been to Israel, and some had been to Northern Ireland and had got experiences from the war situations there. And so, we were pretty well organized. That Andrew Fleming was top hospital, and did a lot of good for those wounded soldiers. Hannes, I wasn't there very long. I think I was there about 6 days. And I could start walking again, and then I got back onto it, and I was back in the bush.
But now, Bookies,
but I was very lucky.
Some stage you lost your weapon. How did that happen?
Hannes, that's Stu Michael. He's a bad. Hannes, that was in part 2 days. In fact, our very first patrol to Mount Darwin, we were in the club, the Mount Darwin club, and we left in the early hours of the morning. And then think on the way on down the road to the Mount Darwin police mess, I dropped my rifle, but I had to go back the next day. It was still lying there, thank God. And thank God we didn't get attacked that night. Yeah.
So,
but that's
you went into to ground coverage, so it's into intelligence gathering.
Yeah, and I was lucky. I got a post at Nyakas Dam, which is very north. It's right near the high-level bridge on the Missouri River going into Mozambique, and it was really a hot area. I mean, that area is where, in the Foster Detente days, a good support unit operator, Brian Moore's-Pitt. I don't know if you ever heard a story about him where you remember we had to negotiate. If we came across them, we had to negotiate with terrorist groups about laying down weapons and coming together. I think it was, you would know better than me, but I think in my little world, I think it was forced onto us by Foster and the South Africans. But in that same area that I became ground coverage, it happened prior to my arrival there. 4 South African policemen who were operating up there in the police camps from them were abducted, and I think they were murdered. I don't think we ever recovered their bodies. But the talk was that they were thrown into the Missouri River. And after that incident, Brian Moore's-Pitt had his incident where he sat and he spoke with them, and there was negotiations. And literally, that guy was really, I mean, he held his own, and he's a good operator, Brian. I don't know if you've ever met him, Hannes.
No.
But he had to go through that whole rigmarole of negotiating, and he was... it's not. I think he was outnumbered at the time, and he had laid his weapon down, and they still held theirs, and he negotiated, but it never really worked, and they both went their separate ways.
But he didn't get killed.
No, he didn't. So that it was a very exciting area, that it was highly active all the time. They were constant, and I worked with the territorials at 10RR. And there a lot, and led by, I think the Sergeant Major was Dave Black, who was the principal of Black 4B.
Okay, I didn't know.
Yeah, he was heavily involved with them. Anyway, they came. And as a territorial force, they're good. They worked hard, those guys. And they were really, and I think there was a farmer from Enkeldon who was a major in 10RR, because it was a unit from Guelo, Hannes, stand to be corrected, but they were good guys. I worked with them a lot, and it was highly active. For INTAF, internal affairs were there in a big way. Charlie Gloss was internal affairs there at the time I was there. And yeah, Hannes, and during that period, I mean, the terrorist commander, and I heard at some stage, and I would have liked to have met him, even from my days of CIO, was the Turk commander was a guy called Vu. I think that was probably his code name. And so Nyakas Dam was called, we called it Lake Vu Inn. And so after him, and it would have, but I heard he was the commander of 5th Brigade at some stage. But whether he was, I don't know. I never pursued him, but he was very active. And but
Yes.
I think we had the upper hand, and we were making big strides there. We were really doing well. And then I was at a keep one day, and I had picked up 11 people. I could see that there was, in those keeps, I could see that there had been terrorist activity. And the information was coming in, and I'd loaded my Land Rover pickup. I had at least, on the back, I had at least 8, 9 suspects that I was taking back to Nyakasoro, where my camp was. And support unit were there at the time. Ron Hine was I don't know what troop he was in, but support unit were my backup, and I was deploying support unit and 10RR, and I was like, GC was the intelligence officer on the ground. And on the way back, I hit a landmine. And Hannes, yeah, I think 6 of those 9 people that were, Ron Hine and I got out and walked out. But I think 6 of the 9 suspects I had on the back were killed. It was a mother blast. I had aluminium side doors of my Land Rover. I didn't take those off. Other guys did. For some reason, I kept mine on. So I had those half doors. And with the blast, those blast doors are aluminium. And so I took a lot of flak of splinters of aluminium into my legs and my back. The 3rd and 4th vertebra, the cartilage were crushed, and obviously my ears. And anyway, it was Kesevect. We got back to Nyakasoro base, and then the next day I was Kesevect and back to Andrew Fleming. And so this is after being shot, hitting this landmine. So it was about a year, 2 years, and going to Andrew Fleming again. Hannes, it was unbelievable. To meet me was Standish White, and there was Professor Fine. I don't know if you ever know the name or heard of him. He had just been to Ireland to deal with, he was a ear, nose and throat specialist in Harare. And he had just been to Ireland and had come back. And obviously Standish White was well known. He was a jacked up guy. And you go through all the x-rays. But Standish White said, right, when he had heard there's a landmine blast, there was me and there was an INTAF guy somewhere in Rhodesia had hit a landmine just after me. And he said, I want to notify me when those 2 guys arrive, and I want to deal with them personally. So when we arrived, we were like his guinea pigs. And he started the treatment on the blast on our eardrums and stuff like that. And yeah, Hannes, although some days, I suppose I go through days where I'm sure at some stage I'll need a hearing aid, but he brought me back to nearly 80% of hearing back. And he was bloody good. And my back was fine, and my legs and all that. And obviously I had those wonderful nurses who when they saw me, oh, no, not you again. But luckily I was in a bigger ward now with all kidney stones of people that were elderly and didn't want to think that I was dodging the draft.
Walkies?
So, yeah.
Walkies, we're going to have to stop there.
Okay, Hannes.
But please, this is just the first one.